Spotlight. I'm Chrissy Wozniak. My guest today grew up on a family farm in Germany where he fell in love with farming and pursued an ag engineering degree. His love of agriculture and travel has taken him to many continents and eventually led him to Manitoba, Canada, where his entrepreneurial spirit has proven very successful. From Bushel Plus, I would like to welcome Marcel Kringe. Welcome, Marcel, and thank you so much for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me. This is great. Thanks for getting me on your show. Appreciate it.
No problem. First, let's talk about your background. So, in the mountains of Germany, learning from three generations, together on the same farm. Tell me a bit about that.
Yeah. So as you can hear in my accent, I'm still, my English sounds a little funny. So born and raised in Germany, on a small farm, 10 acres, 5 cows, couple of horses, 10 chicken and a goat. It's kind of how I describe it. In the hills/mountains, compared to Manitoba, it's mountains. I'd say we're about 500-600 meters above sea level. And the great thing was to grow up with, 3 to 4 generations in one household. We had the great grandparents around, the grandparents, my parents, and then my sister and myself. And that was just a different appreciation of life. You were out on the farm. We were always outside as kids. And just growing up with this, I would say, older generation who survived a lot of things that our generation hopefully will never need to see, just gave you another appreciation of life or things that are taken for granted sometimes. So.
Yeah, that's really cool. And at one point you took a job in Canada on a 3,000 acre farm. Big difference from 10 acres. And so what did you learn on that farm that was not possible for you to learn in Germany?
Yeah, so I grew up on this farm, and where it's a lot of grasslands out there, lots of cattle, not many full-time farmers, lots of hobby farms. So in order to pursue more the job of being a farmer and the agricultural side of things, it was opportunities like that to go work on different farms where it just was an eye-opener to do I don't want to say proper grain farming. We did that too, but in smaller scale. But then you go to 3,000 acres in southern Manitoba, where every field is perfectly square, and you have those big tractors, and the implements are all of a sudden massive, and I started driving with a 35 horsepower tractor as a little kid and a 1-furrow plow, and then all of a sudden you have 500 horsepower under your butt, and you're pulling a 18 meter drill, or 40, 50 foot and 60 foot implements. That it was just that was cool, just to see how other countries operate. The culture difference I found really interesting in general when I travel and work in other places. And it was a family that moved from Germany to Canada that I was working for. Okay. And they've been there for, I think at that point, they've been there already for about 30 years. I don't want to date them, but probably out there for quite a bit of time. And it might have been 30 years. Right? And just the pure scale of it, the different nature, and coming to Canada, building something from scratch is something that really, really intrigued me. They started with a small farm and they grew it over the years. And that's just something where I took a lot from, or learned a lot from, I should say, because you're working on a farm, but you're working for an entrepreneurial family, right? Everybody's involved. Everybody has to pitch in. They have ideas. If something doesn't work, you have to fix it on the fly. All these things that where in Germany, sometimes the dealer is pretty close by, depending on the area. But in Canada, or the other countries I was working in, is that's a drive. So you better figure out how to fix this in the middle of nowhere. And just the vast, I guess, openness of the country, which is cool. So very, very different from home, where we would build our own machinery too. My grandpa and my dad, they can build anything, they can fix anything. It's just the type of guys they are. But then putting this onto a larger scale, which is cool to see, going from 10 acres to 3,000. I thought I've seen it all after that. So.
Wow. Yeah. And then life led you to Russia after that on an even bigger farm. So tell me about that.
Yeah. So that was, so after that summer in Canada, I was at university at that time. I was in university already, so I was going for, in Germany it's an engineering degree. They call it ag engineering, so it's a mix between agronomy, ag engineering, or you can major in animal science as well. But back in the day when I was in there, it was an engineering degree, so you could compare it here to a Bachelor of Science.
Oh,
so
wow.
That's how they call it over there now. They kind of, I guess, adjusted all the namings around the world. So that's what I was going for. And then in the summertime, we have those breaks, summer vacations, summer breaks, I guess you call them here. And I went to Canada, came back to university, and they had this job board there. And I went back to the job board because I always worked on farms beside university. Like I was working for custom crews on farms. Maybe I was more on the farm than in university some weeks. But because you had to pay for it too, that's the other thing. However, I read that thing and it said looking for people for a 20,000 acre farm in Russia to drive combine, lead harvest crews, and lead seeding crews in the fall. I was like, 20,000 acres. I want to go there. And I love history. So there's lots of history out there, that area. I'm a fan of like Eastern Europe side, like kind of those countries. So it's like, I kind of want to see Russia. I want to see how that looks. And then when I talked to the farm manager there, I applied for the job. And then they were telling me they are actually planning to grow this farm to 80,000 acres within 3 years. So they went from 0 to 80,000 acres in 3 years. In the first year I was there, they harvested 20,000 acres. That was their very first harvest. And that was an eye-opener. And I'd say still some of the best times in my life. Like I was in my early 20s. You go there, I spoke 5-6 words of Russian. Nobody, shouldn't say nobody, but especially in the countryside, hardly anybody speaks English. So you're there with hand and feet. I learned Russian along the way. I could talk to people, I could set up machinery. I learned all the swear words pretty quickly because that's what they thought was funny for me. And then when my swear words came out more than with the locals, then they were so happy about that. And then they kind of got the respect from them. And I showed them that I wanted to learn the language and I wanted to work with them. So I really had to show them the respect. And you cannot just come across as like, oh yeah, I'm here from Germany or I'm here from Canada, I'll show you how it works. That was never my philosophy, and it's not will never be, because you have to work with people. You have to be a team person, especially out there when you don't speak the language. But you have a 20,000 acre harvest ahead of you. People have never driven those machines, and we're in there explaining it to them by hand and feet and translators, and it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of chaos, a lot of things going on, but we got the harvest in, and I gotta say, the hospitality there was absolutely amazing. And you hear similar things from other people that traveled in the country that worked there, especially on the countryside. People invite you to their houses, and if it could even be the poorest family or the poorest house in the little town, the table will be full of food. And you cannot just say, oh, I just ate or I'm full. You get stuff full of food. Like there is more food for you there, and they will take care of you. Like the hospitality is, once you get their trust, once you work with them, was absolutely amazing. And it was very genuine. It was not just, oh yeah, just come over. It was like, yeah, no, we'll have you over tonight, and you're not leaving, right? You're coming with us. Like you're invited. You're our guest. It was very genuinely from the heart, and lots of great people. Because at the end of the day, we're all just people. So, so they built the farm. They got brand new equipment in, and then I turned from that into a second season. So I kept working on that farm throughout the university from Germany, stayed in touch with them, went back for a second season. And then we harvested about 55,000 acres that summer, that second year. So and then I got the opportunity. Oh, it was just mind boggling. It's like not the family farm anymore, because it feels industrial at times and corporate at times, just because you have so many layers of people and management. But my boss was always joking. He was a German a guy there, the farm manager, and he was always joking like, "This is tiny. Like you haven't seen nothing yet, Marcel. You should go see my old boss." So he used to work for the largest dairy farmer in Russia, who at the time was farming 500,000 acres.
Wow.
And I hopped on a train. It was a night. They have lots of night trains there. So you have like a cabin either with 50 people in the full wagon there, or like 4 or 5 people in a cabin. So and you go like in a 12-hour night train, go to the next city. Hopped out there, toured the farm with another agronomist, and by accident met the founder and the owner of this whole operation, who
Wow.
happened to be to be German as well. And he invited me for breakfast next morning because I just introduced myself, just walked up to him, "Hey, just want to tell you my respect and what you built here, and I mean, nice to meet you. Would you have some maybe 5 minutes for me for some questions?" So I invited me for breakfast next morning, talked about the whole farm and how he built this massive operation. And they were farming in 3, 4 different areas in Russia. And on the very end, he goes, "Well, what else do you want to know?" I said, "Well, I've heard you're farming in Siberia, which is pretty much the other side of the world when you look at the size of Russia."
Hmm.
And I said, "I would like to know how you farm over there. Like, how is the climate there?" And he goes, "Well, how long is your visa still good for?" I said, "Well, about 3 weeks." He goes, "Well, here's my HR lady. She speaks German as well. You talk to her, and then she'll get you a flight ticket here for next week, a plane ticket. And then you tell me, you go there for a week, you check out the farm, you tell me what you think of it, you tell me what we can do better if you think so, and you tell me if you want to work for me." And a week later,
Wow.
yeah,
That's
and
amazing.
it was just like we can probably go on for hours just talking about these 2 years spent in Eastern Europe and Russia, because it's just been a fantastic experience. And then so a week later, I was all the way in Siberia, like north of Kazakhstan, like China down there that way, because that's where you are in the world. All of a sudden, you're like way out east,
Wow. I
and
didn't know they could even grow things out there.
it's amazing. And a lot of good forage crops, really good corn silage, lots of rain in the southern part at least. There's other areas in Siberia where it's very, very dry, like no-till, similar to Saskatchewan. Lot drier than Saskatchewan, but
Hmm.
similar. And then southern part, south of Novosibirsk, where I was lots of rain. They were even plowing just like in Ontario, plowing for corn silage, and but massive fields with different kind of like forests in there in between, and nothing like Manitoba, like southern Manitoba, where everything is nice and square. No,
Hmm.
over there, imagine you just tip over a pail full of paint, and the paint just runs everywhere. And wherever there's no paint, there's a bunch of trees. So, but on a massive scale. So how they were seeding
Incredible.
sometimes is they would fill the seeder, they would start, and the semi would just drive behind the seeder, keep going, and follow the seeder around all these things, because it was endless. Like, because
Wow.
the drill couldn't come back to any headlands. And even we in Western Russia, where I was in my main farm where I was working on there, was right on the border to the Ukraine. So on the Russian side, but border to the Ukraine. So the headlands were bush, and then it was the Ukraine. So right now, where they have all these things going on, it's very sad to see for me, because that's the
I
fields where we
bet.
were harvesting.
Wow.
But there we did our own roads, because there were no, like, it was so massive in land that you have to look on the map and say, yeah, we'll do a road here, and this is good for the grain cart, so we should put a road here. And if we can't drive from one field to the other with the fertilizer spreader, because the fertilizer spreader will be empty by the time we get to the end, we'll have to put a road in here. Like, it's just insane. Like I said, I can go on for hours, but it's been a very cool experience. And we're dialing in combines out there. That was one of my main things, and didn't end up staying there. I decided to come to Canada instead after my university. But it's been quite amazing. And as you can see, I'm just kind of, I get into it quite a bit once I get
Yeah,
going.
that is so cool. And you also, went to Brazil and Australia and experienced agriculture there too. So all of these different climates, what did you notice about and the differences?
it's interesting how crops can adjust. Like, as you said already, you hardly thought that you could grow crops out there, but Siberia is very similar to Manitoba, and they had about 100 frost-free days in Siberia, and they were also doing swathing, where other areas of the world have never heard about swathing grain or swathing peas and canola. But they were doing lots of swathing out there and to kill the crop and then combine it, but super heavy in moisture. And then Brazil was like a bit of the opposite, because they can grow 2 crops in 1 year. And we were all over Brazil. One of my professors asked me in university, say, hey, Marcel, would you be interested organize an excursion to Brazil for a bunch of people? I was like, well, that sounds kind of cool. And another friend of mine was in Brazil at the time. So 3 of us got together. We started planning an excursion for about 40 people to go to Brazil. And after a while, we started to realize that this is insane. Like, this is a nuts task to do, because we didn't speak Portuguese. We made some contacts in Brazil that spoke German, but it was just a massive task to do. And then I said that to my professor after a few weeks, and he said, yeah, for years we're trying to find somebody who's crazy enough to do that. And we thought you would do it, but nobody ever wanted to do it. I said, well, thank you. I guess I'm in it now. So my 2 friends and me, we ended up organizing it, took 40 people down there, and we went for 3 weeks through Brazil, East Coast, checked the harbors out where they shipped the grain, went through the country, visited lots of ag colleges and farms, and then went also into Mato Grosso in the northern area where there's this massive plains, like the prairies, basically. Some of the flood areas in the I think it's the largest flood area in the world up there in the Pantanal. So it was just a great experience. But back to your question, because I keep rambling about these stories, how those crops can adjust from different climates. In Brazil, they were harvesting soybeans at a time, and the planter is going right behind it, hammering in the corn.
Wow. And
you go to the next farm, the corn is already this high. It was only like a few days in the ground. I'm going, like, this is good for you guys. I mean, you have rain, sun, it just keeps growing.
That is amazing. I never would have thought of that.
Yeah.
Coming from Canada, you have to have winter first.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And same for me growing up in Germany, whatnot, with lots of snow. And they just had to plan to go right behind the combine. And you just look at it and you go, this is cool, but it's very different. In Australia too, there's I was more on the western side of it. We have customers all over with Bushel Plus. We have customers all over Australia. But when I was there personally, I was more on the west side, which is similar to the prairies here for Canada. Lots of large fields and whatnot, and dry, usually dry air. Last couple of years, they have in places had some really good harvest, thankfully, for some decent rain. But same thing there. The crops were just adjusting, and it's different varieties and different genetics, totally get that. But still, it's wheat, and it's growing all over the world in these different areas of corn and soybeans. So that's kind of fascinating for me. So if you ask me about the crops, I can talk for hours about the people. That fascinates me. But
yeah, for sure. Well, both plants and people. How exciting. So what made you settle in Canada then? Of all the places in the world you've been?
Yeah. So before I finished university, I was thinking about what I'm going to do. So Germany was too boring at a time. I just have to say it how it is. There was not the excitement things going on at the time. Russia was a great opportunity to become a second farm manager there and help building these farms. But Canada had an opportunity to start in a different country and potentially build something for yourself someday. And I always dreamt about farming myself or having a custom farming operation, a custom farming contracting business. That was always my dream. And and that time it's like, what, if you ever want to have a family, or I had a German girlfriend at the time, we were going to university together, and we're like, what, this is, instead of moving there, take the opportunity, let's go to Canada. which which I mean, I'm still here. I never really planned on being here. Still, 10 years later, I'll really immigrate into it. It was kind of like, let's go for a couple of years, see how it is. Maybe I can rent some land someday, or maybe I can buy a used machine and do some contract work. But yeah, it was just the adventure, doing something new and different, not do the standard route. I guess I don't like to do yeah.
Yeah,
It had to be a bit more adventure, I guess.
for sure. Oh, that's so cool. So where did the idea of Bushel Plus come from? Explain what it is and how you got here.
Want the long story or the short story?
Lots of time.
I guess I can drag on all my stories, even the other questions. They're going to talk another 20 minutes for each answer. But, really, as I mentioned already, it was all around the world and being involved in harvest. Mm-hmm. But it didn't matter where I went. It was you saw the same thing, that combines were used to harvest, but the setup of them was always there wasn't much time spent on it, to be precise on it. And there was always room for improvement. And even if we would do something like ourselves, for example, we would start looking on the ground, right? Trying to judge, where is it coming from? Well, we have no idea. Is it rotor loss? Is it sieve loss? Is it header loss? If you're behind the machine, there's a couple of tricks between header loss and machine loss. We can get into the details, but really, if you look behind on the ground, you don't really know where it's coming from. It's not accurate enough. Then you're running beside a machine, trying to catch a sample, trying to throw like a cookie tray underneath the machine, or some kind of top or a pan or something. But then those machines are getting pretty big and faster these days. So running beside that, trying to throw a pan underneath is, again, super dangerous. We had people telling us by now at trade shows, at meetings, that they know people that fell beside the machine. One of my buddies actually fell beside a machine once, and thankfully he didn't get driven over. There's a customer in Washington, Idaho area. His hired man actually lost an eye trying to measure combine loss, because he had a plastic tub on a long stick, and they would just run beside the combine, trying to just swipe through the chaff and then run away. And as he was running away, he tripped. The stick went into the ground and went right into his eye, but he was wearing safety glasses, thankfully. And the farmer told us, if he would have not worn safety glasses, he probably would have lost his life, because the impact was so hard that he lost his eye with safety glasses. Oh my goodness.
Wow.
So when that farmer showed up to the booth at the trade show, he bought it right away. Like he just looked at the booth and said, "I'll take one." And I'm like, "Do you want a rundown?" He's like, "No, I get the concept. This is awesome." And then, like, as the they were writing him up, right, and like taking the information down, and like, just curious, like, have you heard about us before or what? And then, well, actually, here's how it went in the past. So he told us about this. So safety is a huge aspect for us, right? And as those machines get bigger, everybody should come home safe at night. We all, people have family and everything else. We're all human. So the safety shouldn't go flying out the window just because harvest is busy. That's the thing.
Yeah.
And I know it's tricky. If the combine stands there for a minute or two, it feels like 3 hours. I'm a farmer by heart. I know the feeling, but there's some safety we can apply for it. And then it was about, okay, safety, how can we make this easier? And then we were just playing with designs and prototypes, and ended up playing with remotes and magnets, electromagnets. And it came up to a design. I'm not going to take all the credit for the designing. It was a great team of people that we worked there with over the years, and that took just a lot of playing around, and always realizing it's not accurate enough what we're doing, it's not safe enough what we're doing, and it's not quick enough.
Right.
We got to play with something that is easier. But it was mostly for us. Like, it wasn't really something. If somebody would have told me this is now a company where we sell to 28 different countries and the big OEMs are using our systems, and I would have probably never believed it, because wow, it's just for us. So fast forward, I was always involved in these things. Then moved to Canada, working for a custom contracting business in Ontario again, harvest again. Then I moved out west, looking for different opportunity, became the Cargill Agronomist in southern Manitoba. And, I didn't take holidays at harvest because I love harvest. So I just was running around to my agronomy customers and used my prototypes, my drop pen systems. So, and then used the drop pen system with one of the customers and figured out his combine losses, calibrated his loss monitor so he could trust the displays in the cab so he could finally drive the machine properly. And he had a bunch of wheat to cut. And he had some fusarium in there, so we set the machine to blow the fusarium out. So he actually sold it for a higher grade at the elevator. There's so many add-on benefits on this thing if you use it properly. You just have the time to use it. And then that farmer got back to me a week later, and he goes, "You know how much money you saved us roughly last week?" It's about $60,000 to $70,000 Canadian.
Wow.
You saved us just by using the tool. So now, a farmer buys a tool from us between $2,000 and $3,000 and a bit of change. If you put that even as a per acre investment, we look at fertilizer, crop inputs at a per acre investment. Somebody buys that, it's a couple dollars per acre investment, depending on your farm size. Over 5 years, we're talking peanuts per acre.
Yeah.
You set up a machine that costs you $500,000 to over $1 million to properly harvest the grain that you worked so hard for to grow all spring.
Right. Yeah. And then to lose it right at the end.
Yeah, exactly. But even if you look on the ground, even if you do something, we had comparisons where people came back to us and said, "You know what? I realized since I have this system, it's a lot more precise. It's a lot quicker what I was doing. And I don't want to think about what I did the last 15 years because it doesn't look bad on the ground. Or, even if you throw a square foot thing or a little pan, it lands in different places all the time. It's not as accurate where ours always measures in the same place. There's just lots of things to it that make it more precise." So then that farmer told me, like, you should build a few of these things. And then more and more farmers were interested. And then I was scared. I was scared shitless because I was like, well, how do I pay for, pardon my French, but how do I pay for, 12 of these things, metal, paint, parts, all this kind of stuff. And how do I make it so it's actually, you can actually give it to somebody else and feel good about it? Because if it's just your own, well, it can look a certain way, right? Or it doesn't need a sticker on it, or it doesn't need a box because you don't have to ship it. So you have to think about all these things. And then I came to Canada with a bag full of clothes. That's all I had. I just wanted to work. So now sitting there going, well, how do I pay for this? So it was a great manufacturing company that said, "You know what, we'll get you going. We'll help you. Just do a bit of a down payment, and then we'll float the metal, and we'll see how that goes."
Amazing.
And then farmers kept talking to me. And an amazing thing about that is the other day somebody told me that's crowdfunding, which back in the day, I don't think that term even existed back then. But what was happening is I told the farmer about it and I said, "I want one. Here's a check in full." Wow. The product wasn't even built yet. Like, well, here's the e-transfer. And I said, "Well, it's not built yet. A couple of weeks, we have it ready." "Yeah, don't worry. Just ship it when you got it ready. And we're not harvesting it anyways. We're spraying or we're seeding." And so I used that money to buy more parts to fund it all. And they got it in time. And some maybe had a lead time within harvest the first year for a couple of weeks, but they were all patiently waiting. And, kudos to everybody that trusted me there. That's what I keep saying. Like, the company is not about Marcel. It's not about me. My face doesn't need to be out there. It's about Bushel Plus and Bushel Plus helping farmers being more efficient, because the farmers have built this company. If they would not trusted me with a down payment at trade shows in the fall or in the spring to deliver them a product in the summer, this company would have never been started, because that's how I cash flowed it.
Wow, that's amazing. And so how does it actually attach to the combine? How do you install it?
Yeah, so it's when you go on our website or when you look at our pictures, you will see a silver square piece. We call this the carrier / the cover. So it has two permanent magnets on the top. And inside of that is a receiver, a rechargeable battery. And underneath, there is what we call permanent electromagnets. And inside of this silver carrier sits a red drop pan in there. So the important thing about this, that there's, sorry, I should answer your question first before I start rattling the other story off. Two permanent magnets on the top. So all you have to do, you take this carrier with the red drop pan inside, take it in your hand, walk up to the machine, and all you do, you put it on the back of the axle, underneath the axle, or underneath the feeder house, or on the side of the header. And you just have to clip it against the metal. So 2 seconds. So there's no wires to run, no brackets. So it's as long as it takes you to walk to the machine, that's how long it takes you to put it on.
Wow.
So
that's
fast.
Easier than I thought.
Yeah, it's the whole philosophy of this whole design is like, it has to be fast. It has to be simple and easy and work fast, because otherwise the farmers won't do it. And I don't blame them. It has to be quick and simple. So, and then, inside there's this receiver that helps you release the drop pan, because what's happening is the red pan is held in place by permanent electromagnets inside the carrier. Mm-hmm. So that means they are always magnetic. So the pan is always held in there in place, and it's nested inside. So that means now, as it's sitting underneath the machine, the silver piece acts as a cover where the red pan sits underneath the cover. So as the combine is going now and all the grain and debris is floating around, there's no grain or debris trickling into your drop pan, so that you don't mess up your sample, because you want to have it riding underneath your machine, and you want to drop the red pan. And then when you dropped it, the combine keeps going, and then you collect the sample in it. You don't want to collect kernels prior. So you put it on the machine, you start combining, you go and you drop it, combine keeps going, and whatever's flying out the back lands up in the pan, and you take a physical sample from what's coming out the back.
Wow.
And while you do that, you calibrate your loss monitor. So while you drop the pan, you set the sensitivity of your loss sensor a certain range that, let's just say it's a third way up, or it's in the high green, or some other combines, you have to push a calibration button. You do this at the same time. And then you push that button, set the sensitivity, you release the drop pan, combine keeps going. And let's just say in theory, you found 1 bushel of loss in the pan now. So now you know that when your loss sensor display in the cab is in the high green or a third way up, that means you're chucking 1 bushel out the back.
Wow. So
you just benchmarked what that harvest loss sensor display in the cab is actually showing you. Where if it goes up now, it's more than a bushel. If it goes down, it's less. Where before, if you don't do that, you sit in the cab and the loss monitor goes up and down, but we have no idea if it goes from 1% loss to 5, or if it goes from 5 to 8. We have no idea.
Right,
it's like taking a measure tape with no lines and no numbers on it, and guessing guessing measurements and start carpentry. Where we put with the Bushel Plus system, we calibrate it so that we can put the lines and the numbers on the measure tape or on the loss sensor display.
Oh, that's a great way to explain it.
That's what we do with the machine. So the machine will still harvest without us, but you don't know how efficient the machine is harvesting, and you don't know if you can trust the loss sensor, because we have to calibrate that loss sensor. Right. And that loss sensor is the same in the machine that you bought 10 years ago, or in the newest self-setting combines you have right now. Same loss sensor. So when somebody says there's a self-setting combine, they do it all themselves. That's correct. But first, they have to calibrate the loss sensor with our system to make these self-setting automation systems work, because the automation system, the computer, does nothing else than we do. It looks at the loss sensor display, if it goes up or down. But if this up and down is not benchmarked, it might slow the combine down unnecessary or speeds it up unnecessary. So, it's the smarter the combine is, the more it actually needs our system, which is the way we have. There's a lot of education around this. So it's not just pushing a button and go.
Right. Yeah. And what are your dealers and OEMs saying about it? What's the feedback you're getting?
Yeah, so the feedback is very interesting and positive, because there's multiple things people are doing now. So when they get it first, and I'm talking about the farmer and dealer now, they're getting it the first year, they kind of figure out how to reduce the harvest loss, how to change some settings, maybe change some combine speed. But then the whole system and the app is really built out to learn more about your machine, so you get to know the machine better. So now a few years later, people come back and say, you know what? Now we're actually driving fast. We are changing machinery settings, push the combine harder, and then see what's coming out the back, calibrate the loss sensor, and now all of a sudden we have a higher speed. Obviously, it depends on the conditions and your machine. So, but now as you drive faster, you have a tool to measure if it's okay to drive fast. Where in the past, and I think everybody has heard that, people would say, don't drive so fast, you're spitting grain out the back, you can't do that. Where in reality, well, we are able to drive faster, but we have to adjust the settings for it.
Right.
If you keep the same settings and drive faster, your losses will just go up like crazy, because you're putting more crop through the machine. With settings, they are in there to put less crop through. So now we can drive faster, adjust the settings, and learn about it, and then drop the pan and make sure that what we're doing is the right thing to do. So they can benchmark and double check themselves. But now you have customers saying, like I said, we're harvesting more acres per hour, so we're faster, which is exactly the opposite from other people that think, oh, I don't have the time to do this. Like, Marcel, I don't like dropping a pan, and then, like, we don't do that. We just go. We don't check. It's like, well, actually, when you start doing it and you learn it, it becomes faster every time you do it. And a couple of years down the road, you would be harvesting more acres per hour. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah. And find the perfect balance, right? That time is money too.
Time is money. And the app breaks it down all the way to bushel per acre loss, but then dollar per hour and dollar per acre loss, which then you can turn into gain, because if you change that, because you want to keep that grain, that's your gain, basically. That's your win. So, there's a lot of great feedback around that, where one of the best things is probably when farmers come back and say, yeah, we don't harvest without this anymore. Like, this is our tool to go to. Because one of the examples I always say is, everybody calibrates their air seeder or their planter in the springtime. You don't switch from canola to wheat, and you do recalibrate the air seeder, the metering system and everything. And you do that by letting it run through a calibration, and you have a bucket and a scale to make sure the calibration is right and the sensors are right. So we are the bucket and the scale for the combine. Because if we do it at seeding, why wouldn't we do precision? We call it now precision. Precision harvest is what we're doing, because everything is about precision seeding, precision spraying, precision here, precision there. But we're doing precision harvest, where we harvest the grain you worked so hard for. So let's get it in the bin, but let's not slow you down either to do it. So it's the balance, the perfect balance. And especially if you look at dollars per hour, holy moly, that's an eye opener.
I guess.
That, because you can change things, what the machine costs per hour. You can really start playing with those numbers and become really efficient. And dollars per hour is something they use in Western Australia now a lot. There's a group that loves to talk about grain loss in terms of not percentage per acre or percentage yield, but dollars per hour. Wow. What can I afford to put out per hour? And then OEMs, back to your question, very honored that, we're working with every different color out there right now.
Really?
They have our systems for their demos, for some of their marketing teams, and the R&D engineering department. Really intriguing. I'm connected now to a few of them from different colors, and they say that, yes, we using this system, we love it, was the quote unquote last week. The engineer told me, we love this. Like, we have over a dozen systems in our engineering department, and we use it to set up our new R&D combines, because we have to calibrate the loss sensor, and we want to make the automation work properly in our combines. With the automation, doesn't matter what color, need to have the sensors calibrated. So just to chuck out a couple examples, when when ACO brought the new Ideal combine over to North America, Fendt, they bought a Bushel Plus system for every single combine to go on a demo tour, to calibrate loss sensors and to show what the machine can do. I just spent a couple of days with Case Corporate in Texas a few weeks ago for the harvest kickoff. So we did a bunch of product specialist training, like back and forth, lots of great discussions where I learned a lot, and I walked them through the new updates from our systems, because I had systems already a few years ago, but now we have new updates in it. Cool things like you can drop the pen not just with a remote. Now you can drop it from our phone app, and the app will tell you if the pen dropped and in the future where it is in the field roughly. Like, we just had good discussions about it, and then they were saying too, like, yeah, this is what bridges the gap to calibrate the sensors, make the automation work. And then when John Deere rolled out the X9, our product was actually one of the X9 videos. And I couldn't
really,
and because they were setting the machine, and you can see them working with our system in the field, and it was right there, our air separator, and it was like, that's cool, thank you. So we have
amazing.
So it's nice to see that they work with us, because I think the last few years the world, I think, has changed, where a lot of people see now, and OEMs as well, see the value in startup companies like us, where, hey, why don't we work with a startup company and integrate it, or work with them more, and instead of doing it ourselves, or instead of
it totally makes sense, right?
You see so many startup companies out there that work together now with OEMs, because they have the expertise in something that the OEM likes. And I think that's really awesome that our world can work like this, where we work together and and figure these things out. So that's kind of an all around feedback. And we're always looking at how to better ourselves. So if somebody has an idea or says, Marcel, my machine is a bit different, or my stubble is like this, and currently your system is different here. Well, let's look at it. Let's figure out how we can do it. So we're always doing something new, and if we do something new, we're trying to make it backwards compatible. So when we came out with new batteries and new receivers, everything is backwards compatible for the last couple of years when somebody bought some, so they don't feel like left behind or left out.
Oh, that's good. Wow, that's good. And who's the ideal farmer for your products? Is it just the big farmers, or can a small farmer use it as well? Is it pretty much universal?
Short answer: everybody who has a combine.
Yeah.
And It doesn't matter how big or small the combine is.
Yeah.
It needs to be calibrated, should be set. Doesn't matter the crop. We have any crop out there, from sorghum, rice, wheat, canola, lots of corn and soybean growers, seed growers for sure. Every seed grower, because that is the big return on investment. But the return on investment, for a farmer, even if we have farmers that have 200 acres in Ontario, and they love it. They absolutely love it. And when you run the numbers in a normal crop year, it takes you about 120, maximum 150 acres to pay for itself, if you save 1 or 2 bushel an acre roughly in average. And in a year like this, where crop prices are through the roof, you want to make sure you catch every single kernel.
Definitely. Yeah. And producers are always aiming for that more efficient ways to manage it. And especially now, the input costs and shortages that they've had to deal with for the last 2 years, it's stressful to say the least, right? And it seems like your whole theme is reduce this waste, right? Make that profit margin bigger. And that feels like what you're devoted to, right?
Yeah, I guess I get going a bit on my passion here. Yeah.
I love it.
It's really about, putting more grain in the bin for the farmer, and then a bigger, larger scale. When you put on a larger scale, there's more grain to truck, there's more grain to sell, there's more grain to export, there's more food in the food supply chain. You can go down that track. if you start running the numbers, it's incredible, how much more grain is out there. So
Yeah, really.
it's a
And
bigger picture than just, it's not just a tool. There's a bigger picture to this whole thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And with everything that's going on, especially right now, what are some of the opportunities that you think growers should be really embracing in 2022?
Yeah, it's definitely a challenging year. I'm not taking that away from anybody, 100%. And I have the biggest respect for everybody out there doing what they're doing, running their own business and running their own farm. It's an interesting year, and I keep saying it never gets boring, and there's always next year, kind of as a joke. But it's it's I can, if you speak for Manitoba, it's been a tough spring, with seeding and pretty wet around here. But it all comes back to there is a crop growing, and with us, the opportunity is if it's a little crop or a large crop, you still got to figure out your combine. And when you ask me for the biggest opportunity, I'll give you a quote from the customer from last week at a trade show. He said, the easiest $1,000 per hour you can make is setting up your combine properly.
Wow.
And I said to him, like, do you want to work trade shows with us? Like, do you want to hang around here a bit at the booth?
Because
he was
hire that guy.
he was just a great fella who had it in his mind. He thought about it properly. And I think, there's lots of opportunities out there, obviously. But if you ask me specifically for Bushel Plus, it's spend the few minutes that it takes to set that thing up. Come to the combine clinics that we have. We have some combine clinics here in Manitoba coming up with the canola growers. We have combine clinics with our dealers all over Canada. There's lots of knowledge that we share around that. Make sure your machine is set up properly. Pre-harvest prep, there's lots of things you can do, simple things that make a big difference at harvest that you don't have to stop for. You do that prior, and then get in touch with us, get figured out how you can use the system in a few minutes, and then let's get the ball rolling for you to feel confident that you can get that crop into the bin and you can trust your machine, what it's doing. Because it's not about, it doesn't need to be the driver's fault or anything that's going wrong. It's not about blame here. It's about helping setting up the machine better, because it could be something broken inside the machine that it's hard to see. But when you drop a pan, you actually know where it's coming from and what the problem is. So slow down a little bit and figure out those things before you get into the heat of harvest. Because when you get into the heat of harvest, you're ready to rock and roll, and you can use our stuff within a couple minutes and you're ready to roll.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then thinking more globally, how important is it to address the need for more efficient food production for the needs of the world population? Is this not just farm per farm, but I feel like this is more, it can affect the world, right?
Yeah, I certainly don't want to make myself bigger as I am here. That's not what this is about. But again, if you start thinking this globally and saving numbers, like we were in a startup accelerator program in the CTA, so that is the Canadian Trade Accelerator Program with the trade commissioners in the US. And we ran the numbers for it. If we only save a couple of percentages of harvest loss across the entire US for every farm out there, we will put over $2 billion worth of grain back into the food supply chain.
That's huge.
And that is huge for people to process it, people to export it, but then also to eat it. And if you look at the food shortages right now, or I would say like the supply issues, I should say, before I say shortages, don't want to put the scary words out there, but I should say the supply issues around the world. This is something to address. And, this, when I talk to people outside of the farming industry, they come to me and they say, you should talk to like the minister here and this person and this person and this person. And it's like, well, yeah, but they gotta be interested in it, because for a lot of people, it's like, oh yeah, food. right? Food's just coming. It's in the grocery store.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. But
it sits on the shelf.
yeah. And that goes back to where we started this podcast, where, talking about the older generations, where, when my great grandma ate an apple, there was nothing left but like this little wooden stick. Like the whole thing was gone, because she has seen times where you had no food, you had nothing.
Yeah.
So
yes,
we're pretty fortunate right now. What my generation, at least, I'm in my early 30s, so pretty fortunate where I grew up. At least, there's other countries obviously, but if you speak for Canada and the middle of Europe, we hope we don't see those times again. But we can prepare ourselves a lot better if we look at the right kind of things, and it starts in the field. But then also it needs people to support that, and if you support it properly, and also innovate, if you help companies like us, and I shouldn't say you, but there is like you as in the industry and you as in the government, there's government grants available sometimes for R&D stuff or for hiring people or throughout, but then sometimes those grants are just tough to apply for because you don't have the time to sit down and go through this cumbersome process or the complicated language, and young entrepreneurs just go and do it. And I think that's the backbone of the country, is agriculture and people that just go out there and do things and invent things and work their ass off and get things done and take the risk. So it's a global thing for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And on a more personal note, while you were in Australia in 2018, you had a terrible car crash. Tell us about that ordeal and some of the people that saw you through that.
Yeah, that is an experience I don't wish anybody ever, not even 5% of that. The good thing out of this whole thing is that everybody from the car crash survived, which is great, doing good. And the thing about it is, that's what I was trying to say with the people prior, where I said in Russia I was so interested in the people, and then in Australia it kind of all came together, where the culture of the ag industry is just incredibly great and warm and helpful, because I ended up in intensive care in Perth in Western Australia, and my family is in Germany. I didn't know many people in Australia because I just got there a week prior. Wow. Then that happened. Ended up in intensive care with a lot of bad injuries, lots of fractures throughout my entire body. The doctors were saying that I was like a hair, like a millimeter away from being paralyzed or being in a wooden box. So it's as close as you want to get to it ever. So knock on wood, that worked out. But what was going on is the network of people that knew I was around and that was connected in Australia, they got together quickly in WhatsApp groups and organized, hey, this happened, this happened, this is what's going on. And then a couple days prior, before the accident, I spent an afternoon and with an agronomist in the field that also I never met before, only by a phone call. And we actually made a podcast together once too. So that was it, podcast and call. But then he invited me to have supper with his family, introduced me to his wife and his two kids, and it was just amazing. And I have to tell this story. Sorry, I have to get into this one because it's like, they were just sitting there and we're talking what we're doing, and then they live on the beach, like not far away. He said, just stay here, just sleep a night here. We have supper together. You can go on your travels the next day. And then in the morning, they just made me hop into the ocean for 5 minutes with them quickly, telling me there's no sharks. But then apparently there's sharks everywhere. So they just
wow.
Yeah. So just as a side note, but the cool thing was that the daughters, they were like, Dad, we want to be entrepreneurs. We want to be like Marcel. Like, we want to invent stuff. We just want to build things. And, cool. It was just funny how that worked out. And, one of them actually went into an inventor showcase in the school. And she went on to win it in the school. And she went all the way up to the province one. And I believe even to the national ones. Like, she just put this whole plan together, invented this machine that was doing these cool things with getting carbon out of the ocean and creating lime, because Dad was an agronomist. So all these little things are just fun stories now that came together. But what this family did, that's what I was getting to, is that was before my accident. Mm-hmm. When I was in intensive care, this agronomist and his wife flew down to Perth, which I think by car is about a 4 or 5 hour car drive, roughly. I don't want to say the wrong thing, roughly. So they flew down and they sat with me beside my bed for 3 days and 3 nights.
Wow.
And all I had with them was that one evening I spent with them and told stories and just, kind of got to know them. And they gave me some family time while I was in Australia. So they helped with communication to back to Canada, back to my family. My sister came down there 3 days later. My sister is a vet in Germany. So unfortunately, she was able to leave. And then they kind of tagged off, and, the agronomist and his wife, they went back home. But, they helped me with everything, with the paperwork. And at that point, they didn't know if I would even make it in the beginning. So it was a pretty rough time for them to look after this random dude in the hospital and trying to reach my parents. Because there was a massive phone chain all around the world trying to reach my parents. And because there were so many different countries involved where I know people. And do you have the number? Do you have the number? Oh, I call this person. I call this one. And it just, you can write a book about those 2 days. Then the other story about it is I got connected to a very interesting, interesting, wrong word, very great and just awesome family. And it's, again, agriculture connection. Mm-hmm. I'm in Australia. There's, Lee working, is his name. He works he was working in the parts department at a dealership at a time. And in Manitoba. So I'm in Australia. He's in Manitoba. Mm-hmm. He sends us a Facebook or Twitter message. Hey, I see Marcel is down in Western Australia. I used to work down there like a decade ago. And there's this great family you should go see. They're probably interested in Bushel Plus. So I can connect you guys. So connected me. I talked to the lady off the farm. And then she said, just come by. You're kind of on your travels by anyways. Just stop in. We'll show you the farm. You're more than welcome to. And she was just this amazing lady that just super nice on the phone already. A couple days later, the accident happened, and they never heard from me again. So I was in intensive care then. But then the guy in Manitoba hears it that I had an accident, calls, and her name is Melanie. He calls Melanie in Australia, says, hey, Marcel, I had this accident. Have you heard about this? She goes, well, not really, but let me figure this out. So she called every hospital in Western Australia till she found me. And she found me in intensive care in Perth. And then they are at this point, they were custom harvesters. So they were going through Western Australia to different areas. So they were about 7 hours away from Perth. So she and her sister-in-law drove all the way to Perth, 7 hours. Wow. And she shows up in intensive care with a little bag of toiletries, walks into my room. And at this point, my sister was there already. She walks in and she goes, hi, Melanie, how can I help you? And, I'm high on morphine and painkillers, right? Like it's like only 4 or 5 days after the accident. So I'm still halfway out. And my sister goes like, who is that? It's like, I have no idea. Because I never seen her before.
Yeah.
And then she goes, no, I'm Melanie. Hey, we talked a couple of days ago. I remember here, contact from Manitoba. I called you. And I was like, oh yeah, right. And then it was just a big, like we all just started crying, and, they were praying at my bed. And it was just, and then thankfully they had a house for the wintertime in Perth. After harvest is done for them, they stay in the city at the time. And then she stayed there for a full week. So she came back every day to the hospital. She was helping me, she was feeding me because the nurses didn't have time. She was helping with paperwork, helping to do the communication for back home. In the meantime, there was who's now our dealer down there. They came in and brought me Australian cell phone. Farmers came in because they were running in 2.5, 3 hours away, came in just to visit. All these things were just, how can I help you? What's going on? My sister ended up staying down there for 3 weeks. One of my now customers from Bushel Plus called and says, hey, we have a house in Perth. You can stay at the house. You're not staying in a hotel for 3 weeks. That you can stay in our house. And if you need something, let us know. And all the just the hospitality, is that the way to call it? I mean, I'm still learning English every day, but just the kindness of a heart for somebody that they didn't know. Like, they didn't know me from a hole in the ground. I spent half an hour with some of those farmers in the field. I never met Melanie before. And they were like, no, this guy needs help. Amazing. This is the way we pay it forward. If my kids ever travel and need something, I hope somebody helps them as well out in the world. And, I can go on for another hour here. My sister broke her arm while she was in Australia trying to help me. She actually fell off they gave her, unfortunately, the bike that she had given to go back from the beginning, in the first few days from the place she was staying to the hospital, the spokes came loose, and then the spokes hit into the frame, and she went right over it and broke her left arm. Wow. And I had my left arm broken. So we have 1 or 2 pictures where we're normal, and all the other pictures we have the left arm in a sling. All of them. So, and just stories like that. So the same doctor gave us surgery, the same doctor. And he's, the whole hospital knew us down there. And, I'm probably forgetting a few things here right now just because it was such a big event. But it was very crappy, not good, because, it took a long time to recover. I sat in a wheelchair for a while. I had to learn how to walk again. Wow. I had about 12 fractures in my spine all the way down. My shoulder was broken from 2 places, almost went right out. Ribs broken, had an open fracture on my left pelvis, internal bleedings, left forearm broken, all these kind. It was just one of those things where it was just close enough. Yeah. And the doctor said, if the only reason why I survived is because none of those fractures shifted. If anything would have been shifted and pinched me a little bit, I would have been paralyzed. And it goes all the way from the first responders. They're farmers in the middle of nowhere, and most of them down there are trained for what's the word I'm looking for? Firefighters. Because they have to fight the bushfires down there themselves, so volunteer firefighters. So they know first aid. So they knew they shouldn't pull me after an accident like this. So they took really good care of everybody there. Right. And, somebody could have just pulled me and paralyzed me right there. And all these little things where people were just watching out and doing the right things and helping out. And, it's just been an incredible journey where a lot of these people now became family, not just friends. A lot of them became family. That I don't know where I would be without all of that without all that support from the ag community, from my friends. There was 3 friends that flew from Canada to Australia to help me out after my sister had to go home again. And, it's just been, I don't know where I would be without my friends and my team, my employees, a couple employees at a time there. Then one of the employees there became my business partner for a few years in Bushel Plus. They did an incredible job picking up the business and treating it like it was their own, kept it alive. I was doing what I could, but I was in a hospital bed with a phone. So wow. They did a massive thing because Bushel Plus was already established. I was already self-employed, and that just gets scary. And back to the beginning, it's like I'm just glad that everybody is good again after the accident. Everybody survived, and that's just been an experience where a lot of it was just scary, but also very many good things came out of it and good connections, because people have come to me since and said, it changed the way we look at life, and we change things in our life because we see how quick it can be over and whatnot. So
that's so powerful. Wow. So where can people find you?
They can find us online, bushelplus.com, but the easiest is really our social media at Bushel Plus, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, now also on TikTok since a couple of days. So
wow.
see us hanging out on TikToks at Bushel Plus, also LinkedIn, Marcel Kringe. I'm always happy to connect.
And how many countries are you selling into now?
28.
Wow. Yeah. So you're from Manitoba. That's amazing.
Yeah, locally made in Brandon, Manitoba. We try to support as much local and Canadian here as we can. We got some other parts cut in Saskatchewan, other parts coming out of Western Canada as well. And yeah, that's all coming out of good old Brandon, where I just settled by accident. So
amazing. And you have other products coming out on the market now too. And what are those? I think you had a release this week or last week.
Yeah, so we just released it here a couple of days ago. So we have the North American distribution rights for the mini combine, which so I can't take the credit to design this thing. Was a great inventor from Europe, but we got the distribution rights for North America because we thought that this is another thing we should bring here and help farmers save fuel and time. And it's a handheld mini combine, battery operated. So you can put this in your truck, drive through all your fields, or to your fields, I should say, and take a quick sample of grain. So you just strip the heads off on the top with it. There's a little thrasher and concave in there. And within a couple of minutes, you have a grain sample. Looks just like in the combine. And you put this in the moisture meter that most people have anyways. And then if the grain is ready to harvest.
Wow.
And you can do in half an hour, you can probably check a couple of fields and drive back with your pickup and do whatever else you got to do. So you don't have to take your big combine down the road, put the header on, cut something open. And if it's not ready, then you have to deal with the grain in the grain tank. You have to drive home again. You have to dump it somewhere, like the whole 9 yards. So we just figured this is a handy tool to add to our line of products that we will start. We started selling now. So it's kind of a handy tool to have. Again, it's all about saving somebody and the industry and the farmer money and time. So that's one of the things. And then we have a couple other things in the R&D that we're always working on some R&D stuff. If we meet again in the future, hopefully we can talk about that a bit more. But I can definitely say there's some interesting and exciting things happening in Bushel Plus, and we're always trying to innovate, reinvent ourselves towards like just things that make sense and help farmers. Our app is the best example. The app in the beginning was like a little Excel spreadsheet as a calculator, and that grew into a platform where you can share your combine settings with others now via text, email, or WhatsApp. It gives you some guidelines of what you could do with your machine, and it saves your combine settings, your loss results in it. And so you can have this all in there with notes. So next week or next year, when you go back into similar conditions, you know how you did it. You know you have a starting point, and it comes back to knowing your machine better and being faster with it. So somebody's always thinking in our team.
Yeah, it sounds like always busy. That's amazing. Thanks so much for joining me today. And thanks to everyone who's watching or listening. If you want to learn more, the links are provided in the show notes. And don't forget to subscribe to our North American Egg Spotlight on YouTube, Rumble, Telegram, or Egg Fuse channels. And the podcast is available on Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, Amazon, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And have a great day.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a cool experience. Thank you.